Hi everybody, Armored Pants here, and I have another video for you. Welcome back on channel. Now today I am going to talk about something a bit different, something we haven't discussed before, but it's something in this series of advanced Blitz gaming. So what I want to talk to you today about is switching roles. So when you become more familiar with tanks, playing light tanks, medium tanks, TDs and heavies, you can switch the roles depending on the characteristics of those tanks. So one of the most, let's say, common switch up is when you use a TD as a support tank. It can be to support your lights, mediums, or heavy tanks. For example, a lot of people who play the Rim Borsig like to play the Rim Borsig as a support for heavies, right? They use their armor and then they go behind with a big gun, rather than sitting in the back and sniping. When I did the Jag Panther line, when I was doing the videos for that, and when I was grinding that line, the second time around, when I was doing it with a more experienced player for the tutorials and the guides, I exclusively played that line of tanks as mediums. I just went, because of the mobility and the frontal armor, etc. I just went and I played them as medium tanks. So when you become a more experienced player, when you want to advance your gameplay, one of the things, of course, then you can do is you can switch the roles of tanks and play them in more, let's say, diverse and complex roles. So what we're going to look at today is the things you need to watch when you're doing that and how to do that effectively. So, as I said, one of the most common is switching a TD to play a TD as a medium tank. You can also play heavy tanks as medium tanks. So for example, the IS-8, IS-3 Defender, etc., often played as a medium type tank. But of course, these tanks are not medium tanks. So therefore, there are things you need to take note of, things you need to be aware of to make sure that you can make that transition successfully. And before we look at some gameplay where you're going to see this in action, I think it's important that we discuss some of the things, the differences. So one of the key differences, obviously, is that the tanks have different characteristics. In particular, medium tanks don't have the view range, TDs don't have the view range of a medium tank. So therefore, you need to be very aware of the fact that you're going to get spotted up. Now, if you're going with other mediums, that's not such a big deal. But if you're going on your own, you need to be very aware that other mediums and lights are going to spot you up. So even though you may have the speed, may have the rate of fire, etc., and that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to do the role as well. You need to be aware of the fact that you have limitations in that respect. Another thing you need to be aware of course, is turret traverse speed. So many TDs have much slower turret traverse speed than a medium tank, and therefore if you're in a brawling situation or you're in a circle of death, you need to make allowances for that. Secondly, equipment loadout. If you are not using a TD as a traditional role, that is sitting at the back of the map and sniping, and we have a tutorial on sniping to show you how to do that, and it explains the difference between sniping and camping. I'm going to put a link for that into the description. But if you are playing your TD as a medium tank, well, then you don't need a camo net anymore, right? Because you don't need those camo numbers. So therefore, you may want to switch to utilizing the better optics to help you close that view range gap. You're not going to close completely, but it helps. Third thing then to look at is, of course, your equipment loadout. Normally with a TD, I recommend that you use supercharge and refined gun because you're firing from distance and you want to reduce the dispersion. But if you're using the TD, and we're going to look at a game when I do that using the T25-2, if you're using the TD as a medium, well then you are going to be firing a lot when you're moving, and you're not going to be firing from such long distance. So therefore, vertical stabilizer is probably a better option than using a refined gun. So therefore, your equipment changes depending on the role. So you need to do that too if you want to optimize your performance, if you're going to switch out the role and be more advanced in your gameplay. So there are just some things to watch out for. Other key factors to watch out for, of course, are usually you have less armor. That's not always the case. Jag Panther 2, Jag Panther have good frontal armor. But usually you have less armor, like the T25-2 here has less frontal armor than a standard medium at its tier. And usually you have a poorer power to weight ratio and poorer tank traverse, not just turret traverse. So there are things to be aware of, and we're going to see in the gameplay how they come into effect and how I try to compensate for those. So anyway, let's have a look at the gameplay and let's take it away now. It is on Black Goldville, which is a great map. And we're going to play the T25-2 as a medium tank, not as a traditional TD. And we're going to have a look at exactly some of the limitations that we spoke about and how to compensate for those. So you can take your gameplay to the next level. So that's how it works. That's how you guys are going to enjoy it. By the way, before we look at all those details, one thing I want to draw your attention to here is a tactic I use when we have an AFK player. And it's a tactic I kind of derived from my love of history. So when the British ruled India during imperialistic times, which is kind of a bit of a sore point for a lot of my Indian friends I know, but nonetheless it is history, it happened. They obviously used to like hunting, and one of the ways they used to hunt tigers was that they would tie a goat out in the open, and then they would sit up a tree and wait for the tiger to come along to kill the goat, and then you just shoot it, right? And that's what I was doing there with the IS-3. If I see a tank like that and it's AFK and has good frontal armor and takes a lot of killing, and I think that the Reds are going to come around on flank, well, that IS-3 is going to proximity spot them. And if you sit behind it and use its armor, you can farm a lot of damage without taking it yourself. So that's sort of using the IS-3 as to go, and I am the British colonial officer sitting in a tree. But of course, the IS-3 came back into play. So it didn't work, but that's just something I thought I would share with you if you want to try something different in terms of your tactics. Now, in terms of the gameplay here, you can see I'm playing this T25-2, which is a TD as a medium tank. So you can see here I'm capturing B, right, which is kind of standard kind of medium tank tactic on a map like this. Now I'm going to go and try to help my own mediums who are on the flank at A. And you can see here, when I was coming up that hill, that there is a discrepancy in the power to weight ratio between the TD and what you might expect from a traditional medium tank. So you need to be aware of that. Now we're going to come into a situation here where I am going to be firing when I'm moving. And this is really important, particularly the kill shot you're going to see coming up here in a few seconds on the Dracula. Probably wouldn't have been possible if I was running a fine gun rather than vertical stabilizer. So watch this shot coming up here. Boom, there it is. You saw that shot when moving. Now, TDs are traditionally not good at firing when they're moving, and they're much better firing from a still position. So therefore, using the vertical stabilizer to compensate that, very important. Now we are utilizing here kind of circle of death brawl type combination scenario here on the AT. Again, please note that the traverse speed, look at the traverse speed here. How do I compensate that? I use the tracks. I reverse track, much as Bobby Vall used to do with Michael Wittmann when they were taking shots. You use the tracks of the tank to compensate for the poor turret traverse. And you see there, you're still slower than a medium tank, but you need to compensate in that respect. So there's two of the compensation factors that we need to take into account when switching roles. I'm also running optics on this rather than camo net because I'm not going to utilize the camo net, so therefore I don't need it. Because I purposely decided I was going to play the T25 as a medium for these series of games because I wanted to do this video. So, you know, QED. So now we're going to see, again, another brawl coming up in a couple of minutes with the IS-3. But before that, we're going to see again, you know, sort of me trying to compensate for the lack of turret traverse by utilizing APCR. Now, APCR, I needed to pen the IS-3 front on, but there's another reason for using APCR. The APCR rounds have a faster muzzle velocity. Therefore, they compensate for your lack of ability to move back and forth, to do peek-a-boom, because you have to take less time getting your shot off because the shell travels faster. So again, something to know. Now, as it happens in this case, I needed the APCR because I couldn't pen the IS-3 with my AP rounds front on anyway. But even if I could, I probably would have used APCR anyway to compensate for that. And understanding that APCR is not just about additional pen, but it's about increased muzzle velocity is also important for compensating against different factors within the game. Saw there against the IS-3, utilizing sort of the forward and backwards momentum of the tank to compensate for the lack of turret traverse when I was in that brawl, and I was able to clear him off, got some help from my allies, and they were able to win the game. So Mastery Game delivered almost 2.7k of damage, 2 bases captured, which is actually what delivers the Mastery Game. And that, of course, is quintessential medium tank play and not what you associate with TD play. So normally you don't associate TDs with capturing bases, right? Normally they sit at the back and support. In this instance, the 2 base captures are what deliver the Mastery Game, right? Because it's the additional XP from the positive actions of capturing the bases that delivers that Mastery badge. You can see here when we look at the XP score, when we looked at the XP score there, you saw that that was actually the case. So there you go, guys. I think, I hope that is sort of a good example of utilizing a TD in a medium tank role, but also helpful in for you guys in thinking about the things that you need to change in your tank and the things you need to compensate for when playing a tank like a TD in a non-TD role. It's non-traditional role, in this case, a medium tank. There are, of course, other things you need to consider if you're playing a heavy tank as a medium, like a Heavium. Again, around the vertical stabilizer versus refined gun, you know, maybe utilizing engine accelerator, etc., rather than improved control, things like that. But I just wanted you to start thinking about the things that you need to consider so that you are utilizing the knowledge that you have of the game and therefore becoming a better and more consistent player. So guys, I hope you found that useful. I hope you found it enjoyable. And now I guess all remains for me to say is, as always, pants off.